Kyle Bradshaw from Chaparral Motorsports, and today we're going to be installing this Trailtech Voyager Pro on this KTM 500 EXC. The Voyager Pro is unique, very different from the original Voyager that basically bolted to your motorcycle in a really nice frame. This one here, quick release. Push the button and the unit comes off your motorcycle. You can now take it into Starbucks with you, take it up to your hotel room, program your maps, do all the stuff you need to do on your GPS. Then when you get back to your bike, you simply lock it back into place. Now the neat thing about this unit is it is truly plug and play. These various pieces down here on the table are going to go to specific areas of your motorcycle that's going to plug directly into the system and then feed that information back into this unit. So on the back here we've got all of our make model specific plugs. These are going to give us tach ignition, wheel sensor, power wire, engine temperature sensor, and then here we've got these two little brass ports. We're going to have the regular antenna and the GPS antenna. And this guy here in the center is our ambient temperature sensor. This unit is going to give you all the information you need while out there on the trail. So join us now as we take these components and install them on our KTM 500 EXC. The first step of this installation is going to be to lay a cloth down on the front fender so we don't scratch either the fender or the headlight itself. We're then going to reach behind the forks and under the two rubber holsters that hold this whole headlight unit in place. Next, we're going to disconnect the OEM Flasher from this main wire harness. Now, depending on how your dealer set up the motorcycle, you may not have the Flasher zip tied up here, but here at Chaparral Motorsports, that's how we do it. The next step is going to be to remove these two screws down here, which holds our OEM cluster in place. We're going to go ahead and disconnect the wire harness by using a flat blade screwdriver. We can actually pull this digital unit out the top. What we're going to do next is prepare our quick release bracket for installation. We're going to throw these 4 screws down through the top of the quick release bracket, and then we're going to attach it to the bracket that will then attach to the handlebar bracket after we get everything secured. As you can see, there are 4 spots for nuts here, and those nuts fit into this cavern so that you can use the Allen key on the other side and that nut doesn't spin on this side. Quite a neat setup. So you're going to want to make sure that each of these is nice and snug. Now the nuts on the other side are nylock nuts, so they're going to have a locking feature on their own. So you should make sure that they're snug down into their little holsters there and then tighten down with the Allen key. So basically on the handlebar mount here, we have the same setup as we had on the cradle. We're going to set our nut in place. We're going to put our bolt or screw through the opposite side, and it's going to thread into the captured nut. Once we determine the proper location where we're going to want this GPS unit to be mounted, we're going to go ahead and secure it with a bolt. The next step of this process, we're going to go ahead and remove the seat. On this KTM 500, it's 2 bolts on either side. Once the 2 seat bolts are removed, we're going to gently pull the seat backwards. That's going to give us access to all of the electronics on this motorcycle. Next, we're going to go ahead and remove the tank. Now please keep in mind or note that the radiator shrouds do not need to be removed. They can stay attached to the tank, which makes this job much simpler than it originally appears. Next, we're going to go ahead and put a rag underneath the fuel connector. This is basically the fuel hose that connects the tank to the injectors. We're going to go ahead and remove that. Next, we're going to disconnect the electrical. We're going to disconnect the vent hose. So once you get this main tank bolt out, you're going to have to go to the front of the motorcycle and remove the 4 bolts that hold the tank shrouds to the radiators. Now the lower bolt on the right-hand side is going to have the horn attached to it. You can let the horn dangle, or if you're uncomfortable, throw a zip tie through it and attach it to something that hangs a little bit higher. You are now free to remove the tank. It simply lifts up and off of the frame. Next, we're going to go ahead and strip the supplied wire leads. Now there's going to be a negative and a positive. It's either going to go to the negative terminal of the battery or to a ground, and then the positive lead is going to go to the positive side of the battery. Now this kit did not come with ring terminals, so we're going to go ahead and use ring terminals that we already have laying around the shop. We're going to go ahead and sit those on here, crimp them down, and then we're going to heat shrink them so that we know we have a good connection. Now ring terminals such as these can be purchased at any local automotive or hardware store. I really like to put heat shrink tubing over any of the stuff that I do. You can use electrical tape, but it's not quite as waterproof or secure. So heat shrink tubing is pretty inexpensive at your local hardware store or automotive store. Now, you don't necessarily have to purchase a heat gun in order to use heat shrink tubing. you can use a blow dryer on high temperature. So the next step is to plug our positive lead onto the positive terminal of the battery, and then to slide our negative lead under the negative terminal of the battery. Now this negative lead doesn't have to go to the battery. It can go directly to ground. That's your choice. Once we have these two wires connected to the battery, we're going to take this wire harness and run it all the way to the front of the motorcycle. The best way to do that is to go ahead and follow the existing wire loom. What this will allow you to do is then to zip tie all of your connections to the existing wire harness so that everything is run in the same spot and all of the wires can be traced down quickly if needed. Next, we're going to go ahead and slide our tach sensor wire all the way up to the front of the bike. This wire is going to follow the same path that we took with that positive and negative lead. Once we get that tach sensor wire run all the way to the front, we're going to go down to the end of the coil where it comes out of the bike. We're then going to wrap the red wire around that coil wire several times. This red wire is going to be able to pick up electrical impulses from the motorcycle. Finishing this off with a clove hitch is a great finish. And then we're going to wrap a little bit of electrical tape around it so we know that it stays in place. Next up is the temperature sensor. We're going to take this copper plate, lube it up, and then slide it into one of the cooling fins of the motorcycle. Once you've got that installed, we're going to go ahead and run those wires again to the front of the motorcycle following the same path. Next up, we're going to be tackling the vehicle speed sensor, or speedometer. What we're going to do is we're going to start at the front brake there. We're going to disconnect and run all the way down to the front caliper. On the way down the fork, we're going to run into this cable keeper. Go ahead and remove these screws so that we can have access to the wire. Then we're going to go down to that caliper where that speed sensor is, remove the existing zip ties, if applied. We're then going to disconnect the OEM vehicle speed sensor using a flat blade screwdriver, and then with a wrench, we're going to remove it from the housing itself. Next, you're going to want to disconnect this wire harness using a flat blade screwdriver. Once you get the OEM speed sensor removed, we're going to go and attach the Voyager Pro sensor and screw it into place. Now this connection here doesn't need to be really tight, but you definitely want to make sure it's snugged up. So what we noticed here was the KTM plug is reversed of what the OEM was. This plug is now too large to go up through this OEM housing. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a razor blade. We're going to carefully slice all the way down this housing. Now that we have this casing split completely wide open, we can take the Voyager Pro vehicle speed sensor wire and slide it through the housing, allowing it to maintain that stock position. Once you get the wire in, the casing is going to close around itself and it's going to look like it has not ever been touched. You're then going to go ahead and replace all of the fasteners that you removed in order to get that casing free in the first place. Now that we have the vehicle speed sensor wire run all the way up to the casing, we can go ahead and zip tie it into place so that it stays secure and out of harm's way. Next, we're going to move up to the front of the motorcycle here. We're going to go ahead and connect the Voyager Pro wire harness to the existing OEM harness that we originally disconnected. Next up, we're going to take some rubbing alcohol. We're going to go ahead and clean off the back fender here so we have a great place to mount our GPS antenna. Now this GPS antenna also doubles as our buddy tracker. Once that's installed, we're going to run that wire forward to the front of the bike in that same exact place that we've run all of our wires thus far, right up next to the OEM wire harness. Now that we've got all of these connections made to the sensor ports and run to the front of the motorcycle, we can finish installing the adapter plate of our Voyager Pro. So since we had removed the OEM digital readout that gave us all of our information, we have this nice bracket here that's going to allow us to run these wires through it to kind of create a wire harness holster, if you will. Once we get all the electrical connections made, we're going to go ahead and attach the GPS antenna to this brass piece here at the base. Once we get everything connected, we can go ahead and turn on the Voyager Pro just to double check that it has power before we button the rest of the bike back up. There it is, bingo. Now we can put the tank back on, attach the shrouds to the radiator, attach our electrical connections, our vent hose, and secure the tank to the motorcycle. Once you get the tank installed, you're going to want to go ahead and reconnect your fuel line. And then the last piece is installing the seat. Now the last step before buttoning this installation up is going to be to replace our headlight shroud up onto the front forks. Now that we have a couple extra wires in here, there's going to be a little bit more constriction, but just maneuvering them around a little bit will allow you to get the headlight shroud back into place and rubber strapped back into position. And there you have it. We just wrapped up the installation of our TrailTech Voyager Pro on this KTM 500 EXC. This is a very beautiful touchscreen display, GPS, friends tracker. You have your phone plugged into it. We're going to go over all of the features and functions of this unit here in a separate video, so stay tuned. What I'd like to point out is how simple this installation was. They really did a fantastic job of giving us a step-by-step installation process. This KTM, super simple. As you noticed in this video, everything was extremely plug and play, except for the ring terminals that we had to attach ourselves and the razor blade cut of the fork shroud here. Other than those two minor details, this is really a plug and play installation that anybody could do at home in their garage with just a couple simple hand tools. Please stay tuned for our video that we're going to follow this up with that's going to give you the features and functionalities of this new Voyager Pro. I'm Chaparral from Chaparral Motorsports. If you like this installation video, give us a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. Until next time, take care and ride safe.